My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice cold. I'm only here to even the score. Whoa. My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice cold. We down right now, but did it before. Whoa. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up.
What up, everybody, and welcome to the Night of Ones podcast, episode number 80. We are the only podcast that features a former UCF national champion, a former UCF radio host, an ESPN analyst and hoops player, an infamous rapper, our resident influencer, and IG star shooting the breeze talking UCF sports. Remember to like and follow us on YouTube and check out the 70-plus teams on the College Huddle, Big 12 Huddle, and all the other places that we are. So I wanted to start the show with something a little bit different. We've been a lot of doom and gloom lately, and we'll be talking a little more doom and gloom lately a little later. But I had a conversation with Eden Espinel the other night when I was at the baseball game, and I just wanted to remind everyone, because it was a good reminder for me, in spite of all the things we talk about, and we're going to continue to talk about them, and in spite of all the challenges that UCF is facing, that conversation with him, and I'll give a little more detail later, for about, I don't know, it was about 10 minutes. He was the last player there signing autographs. He made sure every kid did. It reminded me a lot of Mackenzie Milton when he first came on, and he waited, and there were lines and droves of kids, and he made sure to sign every single autograph. He was there at least 20 minutes later than every other UCF baseball player. In spite of the outcome of the series, these guys, he appreciates being here. And in the era of the NIL and the transfer portal and everything else that's going on, he's one of the few people that you should personally root for. Remember, these guys are people. These are our guys. And make sure you're interacting with them because they appreciate it, especially UCF baseball, who make sure that they interact with fans in a unique way, take care of the kids, sign autographs, they'll talk to you. And in this era of college sports, that's different. So I just want to, as a reminder, make sure we're enjoying the games while we can. If you can go to support, go in person to support. I can't always go because I'm home. My home base is Santa Rosa Beach. But go and interact with these guys because some of them truly do appreciate being here, and it's not just about the money. So on that note, let's go ahead and get started and get the rest of the crew in. First to the stage, as always, our producer Nobra, fresh back from NOLA and with some diseases. Hey, how you doing, Nobra?
Hey now.
Hey now, what? Welcome back, dude. We missed you last week. I can tell you it's not fun producing, editing, and doing all that other fun stuff. So as always, just a quick reminder that I appreciate what you do. Let's get that patented hair flip. All right, there it is. All right, next to the stage, the tallest man in all of UCF podcasting, my good friend, and the guy I got to hang out with and have a beer this weekend, Ben Stout. Welcome to the stage.
What's up? What's up? Yeah, good to be back with you on the podcast, and it was fun to hang out with you, Roger. Had the whole fam at the UCF baseball game this past weekend. My son got to run on the field with his teammates and be introduced at their positions and all that. He got a high five from Lex Bodeker. It was a great day on Saturday, and we got to watch the one win of the UCF series this past weekend, and it was a great eighth inning, and a good time was had by all Knights fans on Saturday night.
Yes, and I had my $2 hot dog and 2 IPAs.
3-2-1 deal, man. 3-2-1.
There we go. All right, next to the stage, someone who needs no introduction, Trey Neal.
Why don't I get an introduction?
Well, because you don't need one. I just said that.
I know. Why not?
All right, welcome to the stage, Mr. 2017 national champion.
Allegedly.
But you promised us some story time a little later about some shenanigans that were going on during the football season. So I'm excited to hear about that. Some of it I already knew. But it's going to be awesome to kind of talk to the fans that are tuning in because there'll be some new information, which it was new information for someone we're welcoming back to the stage after a road trip, Josh Lazar.
Yeah, road trip, sickness. It's been a hot minute, but it's good to be back, especially when there's like 1,400 people on the podcast. It's usually like me and you, Roger. So
no. We cycle through because we have personal stuff, but we got almost a full crew. Alan is out sick. He has a young toddler, so he wasn't able to join us, but he still did do the notes, except for the sports that he doesn't watch. So
yeah, that's me. I got that.
Yeah, we appreciate Alan for that. Even being sick and snotting all over his keyboard, he still did that for us. So we appreciate you, Alan. Shout out, and I hope you feel better. Yeah. All right. So let's start off with what we always start off with, which is UCF football. Yes, football. Yeah, UCF football. Yeah, not what you said at all. That being said, UCF football is gearing up for their first open practice, so make sure you're keeping that on your calendars. UCF actually this evening just released a video, if you have not watched it yet, and it shows the progression from Scott Frost being here, some of the clips that you probably have seen, and then a bunch of practice footage and some highlights from the coaches. Zach Duvall made a cameo, but it was really, really cool to see and be reminded of all those guys entering back. But again, the key and the messaging here is this is all foundational, right? These are a lot of new guys. They talked about the challenge of, how this era of football is different, but they're pushing them. And that's the most important piece of this is that they're learning, they're getting the foundational pieces put in. They're not quite there yet, but they're learning. So what we've told you all along is don't get too used to the guys that you're seeing. We've got the portal coming up. We'll go out and get some guys as well, but they seem to be doing well physically. There's not much else to report at the moment. There's still some recruiting going on, but not a whole heck of a lot. They're focused on spring. But I wanted to start with a little bit of story time with Trey. So for those of you that don't know, Trey Neal was on that 2017 football team. He was also on that 2015 football team. So he's seen both sides of the spectrum. But one of the things that Josh brought up recently was that, he just found out that Navy supposedly had our playbook during that season. And I don't know where you got this one. You were reaching deep with this conspiracy theory that they were using satellites to look at our formations, but whatever.
Allegedly. Someone said that allegedly.
Yeah, there is some truth. Allegedly. There is some truth to the fact that during our 2017 run, a lot of teams had our play call. So including in the championship game when we played against Memphis. So Trey, can you illuminate all of us with how that went down and how you guys reacted to it and how you dealt with it?
Yeah, I mean, to me, signal stealing or knowing calls, that's pretty much everybody knows that. Everybody that's like what you see whenever you watch tape. You get the wide end zone copy and then you get the field view copy and you look for signals. If there's any kind of tails, that's kind of the gamesmanship. Now, the whole thing that you guys talked about a couple of years ago with ECU, that's a little bit overboard. Essentially, here's all the plays that we run and why we run them, allegedly.
Well, Josh mentioned that there was a story going around that, the 2017 team, they had someone had gotten our playbook essentially and started passing around our playbook to the AAC. And when we were talking about the 2017 team, you and I offline, one of the things you talked about was the fact that they did have our calls. They did have our plays, and you guys could see that and you recognized it. And in fact, you changed up the plays in the middle of the championship game against Memphis. So tell us a little bit about that. Yeah. And how many schools had it? Like, was it everybody who played?
I don't know. I don't know if they had like our hard copy playbook. I don't know that. I mean, I'm not going to be like, hey, Memphis, do you have our playbook? Yeah, we have it, Trey. Like, I don't know if they actually had it, but I do know they had our signals because we would call certain blitzes with our hand signals, and every single time they checked out of it, and they were like Riley Ferguson, who was a quarterback at the time, was looking directly at Pat Jasinski, who was he's the mic backer. He's the one that set the calls. He was looking directly at him, and they were checking out of it to the perfect play that would run away from the blitz. So it was smart. I mean, again, and I remember going to the sideline like, Coach Chins, they're calling the blitz away from, or they're calling these plays away from the blitz. So he's like, okay, well, we're going to change it. Not thinking they know our plays and our signals. Maybe they just know a tendency. Maybe we do a boundary blitz a lot more. So, like, okay, we're going to flip it and just go to the field. Didn't matter. They just ran it the other way. So I'm like, okay, they know our calls. So Coach Chins literally was like, you guys remember, I forgot what week it was. It might have been SMU where we were giving dummy calls. We did that that was the first week we gave dummy calls, where we'd signal something, but we would scream a different call. So, for example, we'd be like, this is quarters, like you're flipping a quarter.
Yeah.
We wouldn't say we're running quarters. We'd be like, whatever coverage we're running something different. So they would check thinking, okay, they're running quarters. We're going to run this play to beat it. And they wouldn't do that. So we essentially did that versus Memphis. And, yeah, that's how we ended up starting to get stops. But, I mean, those guys were just uber talented. So they still scored. But, yeah, that's what we had to do. We had to legitimately change our calls mid-sideline. And we had to change who was giving the signals. Because, again, they have people dedicated on that sideline to looking at our guys with signals. That's kind of what started. We had like 5 guys giving signals. And I know people know about, like, Oregon, when it first happened, they'd have the cards. And you don't know which one they're reading off of. That's kind of the reason why you do that, is because you never really know which one to read off of. Because on defense, when you do a card, you can know what card to look at, and then you can go to the signal. When you do signals, if a coach is doing this, for example, and then everybody on defense is doing this, the guy on the sideline is like, okay, this is the coach giving the call. He's the one giving it. And then the other coach is giving dummy calls, whatever. So that's why we ended up having to stop doing that. And that's why cards are very much in tune now with what people do instead of actual coach hands. And they still do some, just for specific things, but not necessarily the actual defense.
Well, now that things are changing and the Mike linebacker now is equipped with a headset, how much do you think that that's going to eat into that ability? Yeah. And then pretty much it's going to prove whether you have a playbook or not, because if they can't steal the signals, then the only way that they know what you're doing is either tendencies or if they know like the playbook. So
essentially what play you're running. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah. And that's the best part about having, in my opinion, the green dot, which is whoever is the one calling plays most of the time. It's the mic. Cause he can just get the signal in and then just turn around. He can yell it to the guys in front, yell it to the guys behind them, and run the play. The only thing is with college, it's so much up-tempo. I mean, you have, Coach Heupel's super up-tempo offense. You're going to see, Coach Frost, he's going to mix in a little bit of that high-tempo offense. That's where you want to have some kind of way to communicate quicker, because with the dot, it turns off and turns on at a certain time. So a coach might not be able to get it in the play call that he wants when the offense is already getting set up to run another play. Like there's a delay in that communication. So I like it. There's times where, again, going against faster teams, you might have to use the sidelines again, but for the most part, you don't really have to use signals. You communicate, and that's what I mean. There are small signals that we do amongst each other, but you'd never be able to pick up on it as we know what the entire defense is doing, from the D lineman, what gap they're going to be in, to the back end secondary. Like, you would never be able to know that. It'd be smaller things, which that would be more, game planning and tendency based.
Yeah. So when we're talking about it, I just want to talk about this quick point before we move on to some other things. But, the quarterback on offense, he's doing the checks, Correct. He's, moving alignment, changing the blocking, doing all those things. The Mike linebacker is the quarterback of the defense. The safety is the quarterback of the defensive backs. How much checking and adjustments is that Mike linebacker doing, other than running up maybe to the lineman and moving them over a gap or doing something like that?
I mean, it depends on how you structure your defense. I know early on with Coach Frost, he put a lot on your Mike linebackers. So that first year was Dimitri Brim. He had a lot of checks. I mean, he was checking the fronts. He was checking the outside linebackers. He was checking sometimes the safeties. Hey, I'm fitting here. You fit there with calls. And then as the defense started to develop a little bit and we start to get, year 2, year 3 in the system, you don't have to put so much on the mic. Your safeties can tell the mic, hey, this is happening. I'm going to be here. You fit off of that. And then the safeties, obviously, we take control of the entire secondary, so coverage calls, all of that. But yeah, the mic has to know everything. Obviously, the more that everybody knows, the easier everybody's job is. But the mic has to know what's going on in front of them. He has to know what's going on behind them. Safeties, we kind of just really need to know what we're doing in the back end. Safety, I was always taught since I was a kid, you're the last line of defense and nothing gets past you. So that's my number one priority, is making sure there's no deep plays getting beat. There's nobody can beat me deep. And then after that, as I get, more into the playbook, start understanding what we're doing, hey, okay, I understand what the outside linebacker's doing and the linebacker's doing. This is where I need to be, and this is the timing I need to be. A lot of it is more just timing, more than everything, because you can get to some places too early and the running back makes a cut off you, but because you're so early, the linebacker's in the wrong spot. It's a lot of that, to where I really, to be honest, when I'm watching the games live, I don't really know most of the time who messed up, because just the way the angle is. When I go back and watch it and I can see it, replay it 2 or 3 times, that's when I know, okay, this is why XYZ happened. This is why it was this person's fault. So the mic ultimately has the most on his plate.
All right, one last question because of the Memphis thing. You guys ended up winning that game 55-62 off of, the back of some defensive backs play. I don't know who he was. I don't remember.
Griffin.
Yeah, that guy. So do you feel like, obviously Norvell was known. He was always prepared in any game that we played. In the first half, he always had a script. And it's not just the first series, like the first half, he had a script and always had special things for us. But do you feel like that Memphis game and that championship game, considering they did have the calls, do you think that's why they scored that much and why we settled in and kind of took back over in the second half, or were they just that good?
So, Norvell, as I've always said, and we've talked about this with our, all the guys, Norvell as a play caller is, like you just said, very good game planner. That's what we'd say. Going in, we call it the first 10 plays. For his instance, it's this is what we're running the first half. He's very good at that. Where he, in my opinion, has lacked is just the second half adjustments. And it's hard. It's not like this is an easy thing to do. It's because we go in and make adjustments, but it's not that he doesn't know the adjustments. It's kind of understanding those tendencies of when we call this play versus when we call that play. So you saw that, I know 2018, that Memphis year, they ran Wildcat all game. They ran crazy in that conference championship. And then the second half, they couldn't run the ball, and he didn't have that second, that curveball, we're talking about baseball. The fastball was the running the ball the whole game. And once they took it away, he didn't have that curveball to throw us off. In 2017, it was a lot of the same thing, but the guys were, in my opinion, they were better. Tony, we hadn't seen them a lot at that point. I think that was the second time versus, that conference championship game. They'd seen them 4 times. And the reason I say that, you understand how guys run. You understand, are they run with power? Do they run with more speed? Are they, that's the kind of thing you get a feel for your play, the players as you play, Memphis every year. Same thing with USF. We played them every year. So
hey, we don't say that word around here. Take that word out your mouth. We say the cows.
The cows. We understood their players because not only did we play them in high school, we played them every year. So we knew what they did. Memphis, that first year, the first game we blew them out. So we were they're good, but they're not, as hyped as they were. And they came out with a great game. He came with a great game plan and great curveballs that put a lot of what we did in conflict. So that's why they scored a lot of points, because the offensive game plan was great. And same thing with Coach Frost. That was a master class for offense for both of them, because not only was the game plan great, but then you have Tony Pollard, NFL guy, Darrell Henderson, NFL guy, Anthony Miller, NFL guy. They had NFL guys everywhere.
So did we.
Yeah, and so did we. You know, so like it's just who wins that rep. I mean, you had Mike Hughes, first round guy. The game one against Anthony Miller, he had like maybe one catch for 6 yards. You know, Anthony Miller takes that personal, him being a top flight NFL talent. Game two, he didn't beat Mike Hughes that whole game, but he got a little bit of him, you know, throughout that game. And that's just happens when you're, again, a first round pick versus second round pick. That's going to happen, you know. So yeah, I think it was just at the end of the day, somebody has to make a play. The game has to end. It's not going to end in a tie. So again, if I was just in the right place at the right time to make the play, if I wasn't, I think one of our guys would have made the play, or somebody on Memphis would have made the play. You know, that's just how it would have ended. And that's just ultimately that's what the third, fourth quarter felt like. It was just it's me against you. You know, I'm good, you're good. We're all really good players. Who's going to make the play when it matters? And then that's just how it shook out.
Yeah, and you just happen to catch the ball in the end zone.
Yeah.
I don't know. I still to this day do not know why he threw that. But he locked in on his best receiver. Like that's just at the end of the game. Who do you go to? You go to the guy you trust.
When everything's on the line and late in the
like you're going to Anthony Miller. We all knew that. It's just we couldn't just say everybody guard Anthony Miller. You know, so that's just how it shakes. And he threw it in the window, and I knew I could be in that window. I just didn't know he'd throw it right at me. So.
At least you had wide receiver hands and not DB hands at that point.
Yeah, no DB hands on that play.
That's the thing. We prided ourselves. We prided ourselves like as DBs, we are not dropping picks. One, because you're not getting. They don't throw the ball to you. So how rare do you? How rare is it that you're going to be able to make these plays? I mean, we might get a good game is 2 interceptions, whereas on offense they complete 25, 30 catches. You know, so. We prided ourselves on ball drills, and I mean, we talk about all the time being ball aware and ball. You know, we were ball hawks. That's what we tried to do was get the football, and that's what we trained to do.
Well, the theory was let's get the at that time, and I think Scott Frost is trying to bring that back is not just play the man, but play the ball and try to get the turnovers and back in the offense's hands because they're more than likely going to score. So
that's how you win.
And that's what I expect to see again. And it's interesting that you made the comment about the playing the same teams over and over again because UCF didn't get the benefit of that the first 2 years in the Big 12. Most of the teams that we played, we ended up playing. We didn't play the same teams year 2 that we did year 1, right? So it's a new learning curve for all of that. How they like to, what their tendencies are, how they react to certain situations, what types of plays the coaches are going to be calling, what's their scheme, advantages, disadvantages of their scheme, all that. You get some of that out of on tape, but like actually seeing that back and forth, hey, if I take this away on defense, what are they going to do offensively? Does he like to go to the run? Does he like to go to a bubble screen? Does he like to, whatever? Yeah. What does he like to call? I think that's something we didn't have the benefit of the first 2 years, and I think that'll change over time. So it'll be real interesting.
And that's the hard part with – because you don't want to, like, say we play Oklahoma State again this year. That team is going to look so different. That playbook is probably going to look different. Like, you're not even going to look at what we did when we shut them down, with Ollie Gordon and those guys, because that whole roster is pretty much flipped over. And that's another hard part was just NIL, the roster turnover. Like, it's so much harder game planning-wise. It's just, it'll be interesting. I've always thought it was interesting how guys do it now. Just because the turnover and you don't see the same guys anymore.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's go ahead and we won't say pivot because we don't say that anymore. Let's go ahead and
transition.
Let's go ahead and switch gears. And I want to get to our pivot poll before we get to talking a little bit about hoops. Ben's going to do some preview for us on what he's expecting out of the Crown tournament, the teams, and then also UCF, although we don't know who's going to play at this point because we've had some portal additions today. So let's start with the pivot poll. We asked the poll of the week, did you give up your football season tickets this year? There's a lot of noise around people giving up their football season tickets. And 90.9% of you said no way, and 9.1% said yes. So 10% is a significant number as far as a percentage is concerned. I'd like a larger pool, but 10% of the fan base giving up their tickets is significant, but I don't think it's as widespread as what people were expecting. So we'll see, we'll see how that turns out. But for right now, I think that I actually would have expected, by all the noise that was being generated, that would be higher than 10%, given everything that happened this year with PlaybookGate and all of that other fun stuff that was going on. So
what's that?
PlaybookGate, man, tell me you don't watch our show without telling me you don't watch our show.
I remember y'all talking about it, though.
Yeah, PlaybookGate was Terry Mohajer's staff's. I don't think this was necessarily Terry Mohajer all the way, but attempt to root out season ticket brokers, and they ended up hurting a lot of the season ticket holders that have supported this program for so long, and it created a lot of uproar. So that being said, you can find that conversation in one of our previous videos.
I have a question.
Oh boy. What's the question?
If they are buying season tickets, what is the problem, I guess? If they're making the money. Isn't that, I mean, ultimately that's what he wants, to make money.
Well, Terry's whole stance on this was, hey, if you're selling it to whoever, then we're still getting the donation, right? But we're not providing those tickets to people that may become donors. That was his thing. And what his thought process was behind that. So
the communication and wording of the message was god awful, though.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I remember Rob talking about that.
Oh, it was terrible. Yeah. And we had a whole show about it, so I don't want to go too long on that road. So let's go ahead and switch gears again to UC. It just doesn't work as well when you say switch gears again. Everybody can't repeat it, but that's okay. We'll do it. We're until we find a better choice of words. That's what we're going to do. And let's talk a little UCF hoops. And Ben, I'm going to turn the mic over to you a little bit because we've got the brand new tournament, which is better than the NIT. We talked about that a little bit last week. We feel like, it's a better opportunity for UCF. It's going to be, I think, watched more. The teams are better. But what do you think about this as a former basketball player, about the crown itself, the teams that are involved, and what UCF's chances are?
Well, I agree that it is a better overall tournament than the NIT. The downfall of the NIT for the most part has been they try to compete with the NCAA tournament, which is the greatest postseason in all of sports. I don't care what anybody says. It is the first weekend of the NCAA tournament is the best sports weekend all year. And that rivals the Masters and other great sports weekends, but you can't beat the first 4 days of the NCAA tournament. But it is
no basketball bias there at all.
No,
right? Not
at all. Well, I mean, as much as the NCAA as a whole tries to crap all over their postseasons, but we'll get into that in a second. But it is still the best sports postseason there is. But the NIT's downfall, I think, is that they've tried to compete with it. Not necessarily head-to-head in the same days, but they've tried to really, go up against it, and it's never really worked out well for them. And it's evident this year with the Crown being created, the Crown basketball tournament, 16-team tournament. It's in Las Vegas. You could say it's a pros and cons to it being a couple weeks after the conference tournaments. Why not get right into it and just but as I just mentioned, I mean, arguably the first 4 days of the NCAA tournament, the first weekend of the NCAA tournament are much more exciting, and there's way more fan appeal as far as the amount of ratings that you get than the Final Four itself, right? So holding off until, 2 or 3 weeks until after the conference tournaments And doing it in Vegas, all the teams. So this is another special thing, and this is actually another thing that's great for UCF. And I'm sure you guys talked about it last week. That this is all the teams that participate in the Crown. They get their trip paid for out to Vegas. So they're not. There's really not much.
And there's NIL being paid to the players too.
That's right. I believe I haven't looked this up specifically, but I believe there's like at least there's like a $1 or $2 million NIL pool that I think it's $2 million, but I'm not sure if that's like distributed to only the winner or if there's some sort of split.
There's two pieces to this. There's the NIL pool that goes to the team that wins, right? And then there's the NIL pool that's paying the players for participating. So everybody gets a certain amount.
So it's we talk about during bowl season, and we talk about during certain certain postseasons and other sports. It does cost us money to travel to certain areas or have a bowl season. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we participated in local bowls in the past. I mean, if we have a kind of 6-6 season, we don't want to spend too much money on going out and participating in some bowl games. Because we do have to kind of pay their own way. So that's another advantage of the Crown basketball tournament is that you're kind of all expenses paid, if you will, to get out there to Vegas. And let's not kid ourselves. I mean, we are we are living in an era where gambling, sports gambling in particular, is the most mainstream it's ever been. And so during that week in Las Vegas, I mean, Final Four week, it's a big gambling week, and adding more things for sports enthusiasts to gamble on is not a bad thing in, I believe, Fox's mind. And I mentioned Fox because they're the network that's sponsoring it, so you get a little bit of exposure. And what I do like about it is with the affiliation that they have with the Big 12 and the Big East, and some other
and the Big 10.
And the Big Ten, but there's not a ton of Big Ten schools in the Crown as far as I could tell. But yeah, the Big 12 and the Big East in particular, they have a lot of schools in there. And so you're going to get some higher level or at least brand names, which is what they're going for in this tournament. And on top of that, I mean, if you look at the average net ranking, I haven't worked out the numbers, but the teams that accepted their the Crown basketball invitation versus the NIT, their net rankings on average were much higher than the teams that are in the NIT. I think the only Big 12 team that is in the NIT is Oklahoma State, which I think was last in net rankings, or one of the last teams. And so you look at the teams that are in from the Big 12 in this tournament with Utah, Arizona State, Colorado, of course, UCF, and Cincinnati. I mean, those are all higher ranked and net rankings than I believe Oklahoma State, with maybe the exception of Colorado, but I'm not sure.
And they were all close to being bubble teams too, right? So that's the other part of it, is like the bubble teams. The NIT, you had the previous structure was the NCAA tournament, the NIT, and then the CBI, right?
Right.
And so, NIT was kind of like for those bubble teams or those teams. And before, in the past, when you didn't have the transfer rules and stuff, you wanted to play those extra games to get more minutes for your guys, right? And now, with the transfer rules and what they are, and especially the timing, there's Tim in Florida, NIT, nobody's interested tournament. I 100% agree. Right now, nobody is interested. It was fun when we were doing well in the NIT, right?
Yeah.
But now with this era, and I know, Ben, you'll get to it, but like basically the NIT has been demoted to what the CBI was before.
Yeah.
And also, too, like the appeal of the NIT when we were growing up, and even when we were in college, and even like as little as 8 years ago or so, like I mean, was the goal of getting to the Garden, like the mecca of basketball, like, and now it's not even in the Garden anymore. Like the semifinals and finals aren't even in Madison Square Garden anymore. It's like
it's Indy. It's Indianapolis.
Yeah, it's in Indianapolis. So it's like it just doesn't have the appeal that it once did. And it's just I think that it's on its last leg. And I think I'll give it to Fox. They saw an opportunity and they partnered with the right conferences. And
they're their properties, right? So ESPN,
they also have the NIT,
yeah. ESPN owns the NCAA tournament, and we'll talk about the tournament here in a minute and the SEC's influence. We started that that conversation last week, but I feel like Fox almost had to have something to counter the NCAA tournament. They had to. And the original concept was that the bubble teams from the Big 12 and the Big 10 had to participate. And that's what they touted, was that they had to participate in this tournament. And then ultimately Kansas State and I think Indiana or somebody decided to opt out of the tournament, of the Crown tournament. So they didn't quite get that, but I still think Fox had to do it. Fox needed to showcase their properties, and it gives us an opportunity to play better power schools, because last year's tournament, NCAA tournament, the ratings were down, right?
Yeah.
And a big part of that was because of the brands that they were trying to make it. And you see that in the NCAA tournament as they're trying to push brands. I think Fox needed a counterstroke, and that was the brainchild of this.
Yeah, and also, again, just the smart, relatively smart timing of it. It's all during the Final Four week, starting on Monday on March 31st, and then ending on April 6th, which is, of course, the Sunday before the Monday championship game. They do have the semifinals on that Saturday, which is the same day as, of course, the Final Four, but it's not competing, timing wise. The games are earlier in the day than the Final Four games. So there's no direct competition with the Final Four games. And so I think it was smart the way they went about it. I don't know how much longer who knows how long this is going to be around, but I think it's a good, they put their best foot forward. That's for darn sure, with the Crown basketball tournament. And I'm glad that UCF is able to compete in the postseason. What makes the Crown probably even more interesting than any other tournament is interesting, maybe the wrong word, but just to see what the roster makeup of these teams are. I mean, we all know we're recording we're recording live. Obviously, it's Monday night. But if you were listening to this later, it's Monday night, and the portal opened today, and so that's just strange timing for the NCAA tournament, let alone a tournament that is happening in 2 weeks from now. And we can get into that in a second, but I was just going to say that we do play Oregon State on April 1st, and I know you probably mentioned that last week, but we do play them on April 1st. The game's at 5:30 on FS1, and so we get at least one more UCF basketball game this season, which I'll take.
Yeah. Question is with who? So one of the things that we were worried about was the timing of of that. We also talked about the timing with Johnny Dawkins, and if there was a decision that was going to be made there, and you talked about that decision needed to come sooner. And it looks like, by all accounts, I think we mentioned last week that this means that Dawkins will at least ride out the final year of his contract. However, the Crown got a whole lot less fun today. We were talking about Sellers and whether he was sitting out for a reason after he aggravated the injury that he had early on. Right. Mikey Keene, new late portal addition.
You mean Mikey
Or
Williams?
Mikey
I
Williams.
was about to say,
I can't get rid of Mikey Keene.
Can't get Mikey Keene out of your head.
Anytime we say Mikey, it always goes
No,
to
Mikey
Mikey
Williams at least stay for the postseason conference tournament.
Well,
listen,
we
unlike
talked
Mikey
about Mikey. We talked
Oh, yeah.
about Mikey Keene for like 2.5 years, right? So I still can't get away from that. But yes, Mikey Williams, Sellers, Niels Mahowski, Tyler Hendricks, and Rokas Joseph all entered the portal. So the question is who's going to participate? Because I don't see those guys risking an injury before their NIL, especially Sellers and Mikey just coming off an injury playing in that game. So, I mean, Niels played pretty well the last game of the when we played in the Big 12 tournament, right? But he isn't a huge loss. Tyler Hendricks was our glue guy and gave us energy off the bench, especially late in the season. So that kind of sucks. And then you got Rokas, who didn't give us much either, but at least it was some front court depth. But he was hurt either way. So, I mean, who do you think they're going to play? Do you like, who do we who are we tuning into? I do find it interesting that certain other high-profile scorers from the Big 12 or top scorers from the Big 12 was not on this list. I was kind of expecting him to go into the portal as well. But what do you?
It doesn't mean he can't. It doesn't mean
he
won't. I mean,
it's
the portal is obviously open as of today, March 24th, and it is open for 30 days this year. It was 45 days last year. It's open for 30 days this year. So it's April 22nd is when it closes. So that's well after the Crown basketball tournament. That's a couple weeks after the NCAA tournament. There's, with the things that we just talked about, a little bit more exposure for a team that's not in the NCAA tournament, the NIL, free trip to Vegas with the NIL implications of it. I think that beyond the 5 that we just mentioned, I think our roster will be pretty intact for the Crown. After that, I think it'll be like any other portal season, and I think that we'll have a lot of turnover. I'd be happy if Keyshawn and Mustafa stayed. I'd be a little surprised if we kept both of them. I might even be surprised if we kept one of them. That being said, I think they're going to play in the Crown. And in regards to the 5 that played, I mean, Sellers was obviously our leading scorer last year. He had a lot of great things to say about UCF and why he stayed, and Coach Dawkins and why he stayed. Like he was kind of our off-season cheerleader. He was our recruiter from a player perspective, along with DJ. I mean, he's certainly, him and Darius Johnson, I think, probably deserve some credit for recruiting certain transfers to come to UCF last offseason. That being said, obviously Sellers hurt himself in the exhibition this year. He has, he only played a couple of games. And so with the ability to, capture that medical red shirt for another season, it looks like he's not going to do it at UCF. It is what it is, or at least at the very least, there is no penalty. Let's be honest with this. There is no penalty to go into the portal at all. I mean, there's no penalty. All they're doing is just throwing their name out there and seeing what comes back. I mean, a guy like I would be shocked if those players I just mentioned, Keyshawn and Mustafa Chiem, like, why wouldn't Mustafa Chiem just throw his name out there? He's probably going to get about $2 million.
Texas Tech's going to come in and throw $2 million.
I will just be elated because it would mean he's passing up a lot of money. I mean, we're going to try to pay him the best we can, but we can't compete with what he's going to get. And so this is the reality that we're dealing with.
Ben, if we win the tournament, could we give him all the $2 million?
We could.
If it was my decision, Trey, if it was my decision, yes, I would. I'm not sure how the breakdown works. I'm not sure if they give it to the schools and they can divvy it up any way they'd like. Maybe there's even bonuses for the MVPs or the all tournament teams. I don't know. That'd be kind of cool if there was. I hope there is. That being said, the 5 players that we mentioned, I just talked about Sellers. Mikey Williams, he averaged 5 points a game. He showed flashes, but at the end of the day, he played in 18 games and he averaged 5 points a game when he was in there. The other players that we mentioned, I mean, we're talking about of that list. I'm pretty sure Rokas Yasus and Nils Mahowski, and even Tyler Hendricks, they played in 22, 25, 27 games, but we're talking about 2 points a game. We're talking about a point and a half. So this mixture of players, these 5 players that have entered the portal, God bless them. I wish them well. I'm glad that they put on a UCF uniform for the period of time that they did. But it's a mixture of injuries in Mikey and Jalen and NGE with the last 3. I mean, they're just Nils and Tyler weren't going to really crack the lineup for significant minutes in the Big 12 on any team, let alone UCF. And Yasus, we talked about his kind of liabilities as a Big 12 defender and a Big 12 big man in
He's
this
not.
conference.
He's not one.
He's not one. And so it's kind of like, we have 5 players that entered the portal that really didn't contribute much to the 2024-25 UCF basketball team. So I don't think that they're a big loss for the crown. Obviously, I do believe more are coming after the crown, but I think that we're going to have our roster that actually played in the crown basketball tournament. We'll see what happens. I mean, we won't be the only one with 4 or 5 players that have entered the portal prior to the tournament. So that'll make that tournament just weird to watch because you could probably see some pretty thin benches.
Well, I can tell you this, Tyler Hendricks, that is one I hate to lose because especially later on in the season, he was a guy that came off the bench and, lit us up and sped us up when we needed to be uplifted. So the Chad Brown type of guy, and he was making a difference on the boards and, towards the end of the season. Now, the rest of the season, not so much, but
yeah, I mean, he's a fan favorite guy. He's an energy guy, as you said, but he's not like Chad Brown was a legit 6-man, on a team that was really good. So he's not Chad Brown because he can't fill it up like Chad could do. He can't contribute from a statistical perspective like he could, like Chad could do. And I'm not saying that you're disrespecting by the comparison because I understand the comparison. He's an energy guy, but I mean, Tyler Hendricks, I wish him well, and it's too bad to see him leave, but he wasn't going to be a star player on this team moving forward, and he wasn't really this year.
Well, it'll be interesting to see who else joins them in the portal. And to your point, they don't necessarily have to leave, but I think our crown roster did take it a little bit.
It'll be depleted
in the shorts, right? But the good news is it's a small tournament, so it isn't going to be as many games.
Right.
The timing of all of this, we were having a conversation outside of in our text talk, which we'll get back to in football season, where as a whole, I think this is indicative of. And there was an article that came out today, too, that, was talking about diluting the NCAA tournament and then obviously it impacting the crown tournament in the timing of when the portal opens. So, Ben, I'll ask you this. If you were playing in this era of college basketball, would you put your name in the portal just to test it out and see what you get? We know about you, Trey. Trey, you were playing on a championship level. Ben, as good as he was.
I mean, would I? Yeah, probably I would have. I mean, and it would have had, obviously, in my case, being a guy that, was just on the end of the bench. I mean, would I have maybe put my name in there out there to just see if other schools would be interested. And the funny thing about this era, Roger, and so it's actually an interesting question to ask me. The funny thing about this era of college basketball is that players now are getting paid when they like straight off potential. Like it's crazy. Like they're like, it's almost like if you're okay in high school and you're like, and you get some D1 offers, you get some D1 looks, like just go anywhere you can. And,
Flash,
and just a guy with 2 years of D1 college experience, regardless of the amount of playing time or contributions, like they'll get picked up by a school and all of a sudden they could be stars.
Well, look at FAU's team last year.
Yeah.
3 of their players are currently playing in the Sweet 16 off of that team that made that run last year, right? So, again, when you're thinking about that, yes, they got paid, but then what does that do to the Cinderella story of the NCAA tournament, right? So you
don't have any in the none of them made it past the first weekend.
Well, Arkansas is the new Cinderella story, apparently. But,
John Calipari's Arkansas team that has exactly
a
$12 million roster.
The
2023-24 Kentucky Wildcats.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we do live in an era where the Kentucky Wildcats could be, despite being a blue blood, a Cinderella because they have not been playing as well. But that being said, I mean, it's real, and as the NCAA tournament as a whole, when we look at it as a whole, the big noise and the articles and stuff that everybody was talking about, and we talked about the SEC last year and how last week and how I absolutely detest and don't think it was right. And I think there was UNC number one shouldn't have been in, but half the SEC teams shouldn't have been in. One, that vacuums up seats and opportunities for other teams that are good enough to do that, right? So they had 14? Did they have 12 out of 14 teams or something like that in the tournament? It was something ridiculous like that, right? They had the most teams in the tournament. That's opportunities for other schools. Yeah, that's other opportunities for other schools to make it into the tournament. You had UNC. You saw what happened with UNC versus West Virginia. And now you're starting to see that trickle down in combination with the NIL and the portal into these teams. If UCF had the teams that we did in the AAC, where we had success under Johnny Dawkins, the Taco Fall times, if we had success like that with BJ and Taco, there's no way that team would have stayed together for those 4 years. It just wouldn't have happened. So what do you do? Yes, but what do you do in a situation like that if you're one of those type of schools, or now it's even getting to the point where UCF has that attrition? So what do you do about that when you can't compete there? I think we were worried about football, but football has and football's bad, right? Until we get longer term agreements with these guys and have them, what's essentially rookie contracts, right? At least for a couple of years in college football, that's going to continue to hurt. But I think it actually hurts college basketball more than it does college football if you look at it as far as the health of the sport.
I've been saying that for forever. I've definitely been saying it for the last couple of years. It's people don't understand how because football is it drives the ship, as we all say. I mean, it gets the most attention, rightfully so. But we love to talk about transfer portal when it comes to football, but people don't understand. I've been saying it as long as 3-4 years ago. I was saying, you got guys that are on their fifth school already, and now it's everyone's on their fifth school, fourth or fifth school, every single year. It's like you're a Miami high school football player that just bouncing from one school to the next, sometimes mid-season. But no, it's in basketball, it's very prevalent. The transfer portal is wildly, it's just crazy in basketball. And to kind of reiterate two of your points there, one of them being how rare it is. So Darius Johnson, we talked about him on going into senior night a few weeks ago. He is one of seven Division I players who has been at a school all 4 years and contributed all 4 years. There was some sort of stat that I heard the other day that it was something about maybe minutes per game or something like that. He was one of seven Division I players that has been at their school and contributed for 4 or 5 years this season. He's a dinosaur. That's it. It's not happening anymore. It's just completely rare. It's already so rare, and moving forward, it's going to be 0 instead of 7. But that being said, the other thing is, how do we compete? And I wish I had the more complete answer to that. I think we have to do what UCF has done for many years, and we have to try to not necessarily we may not be able to just keep guys for 3 or 4 years, because that's not going to be able to happen. But we're going to have to go diamond mining as much as we can until we can get to the level of NIL, and then commit that to basketball if that is something that UCF actually wants to do. And because you think about it, the team that we got eliminated us from the conference tournament. You're looking at a roster in Kansas that is literally, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say 5 times, maybe 6 times higher, the amount of money that they're spending on their roster versus ours. I'm probably not even exaggerating. It's probably more than that. We're talking at least 5 times more in pay-for-play dollars going towards the Kansas roster than our own roster. And so, while they're not a team that is the elite of the elite this year, that is the reality of the situation. They bought their team and we didn't, and yet we competed up until February.
Well, and let me kind of put a different spin on that, because I think
Sure.
Kansas is the perfect example of it, right? So I think that UCF actually has a better opportunity to compete for championships in basketball than it does in football in the immediate future. And I'm not saying that as a diss on football, because I think football has an opportunity to make some runs, right? But I think it's a more difficult climb within the way the power structure is set up. And
what kind of championships? National championships?
National championships. So, and here's why I'm saying that. Think about it this way. Kansas, since you mentioned Kansas, in the past 4 years has won, since Hunter Dickinson has been there, has won 1 NCAA tournament game. Now, what changed?
A lot of people are blaming Hunter Dickinson.
It's not Hunter Dickinson, but the interesting thing is the power structure within basketball has changed, and when it changed was when Adidas stopped paying Kansas and Nike stopped paying Kansas and other teams exclusively. You had certain teams. They were, we all have heard it because all of the investigations that went on, right? They went down to the lower levels in high school and were basically putting farm teams on there and putting them on their brands.
Yeah.
Right. So now that's gone away, and it's a more even playing field as far as the amount of revenue. And by even playing field, I'm not saying for all of us. What I'm saying is that teams like in the SEC or the Big Ten that are making more money, they have more money to spend to be able to compete. It's no longer being funneled to the Kansases of the world and Kentucky of the world and everybody else. And what are you seeing? You're seeing more teams being able to compete, pay players, and put together rosters that will make sense. Now, the advantage that I think that we have is the Big 12. No matter what you say, you saw UConn and Dan Hurley's tirade the other day, right? They don't get the respect that the same respect that they used to. We've consolidated basketball brands. it's pretty much all Power 4 teams left, right? And there's only one from the ACC that's left, right? So we are in that elite group that we can't get into in football just yet. We still have a ways to go before we get into that elite group, right? So I think UCF does have an opportunity in basketball because we are in the Big 12 conference. And despite what the NCAA tournament selectors did this year, I still think, and our performance, and we'll talk about what that breakdown is for us versus the other conferences, still shows that the Big 12 is the premier basketball conference in college basketball. By virtue of that, if we put a little money and a little effort behind UCF's basketball program, we're still part of that power structure. We can still move up more quickly than I think we could in football. And Trey's shaking his head. Tell me why are you shaking your head?
I think the road to basketball national championship is way harder. We're in the best conference of basketball. I would agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
No matter if they're at the SEC bias we saw this year. I just think with that, yeah, Kansas isn't getting the money they used to, but they're still getting way more money than we probably ever will.
They're still getting the same money that they used to. It's just that everybody else is getting it too. Before, Kansas was getting that Adidas money and nobody else.
But we're not in that everybody else. Like that's where like I don't like and with football, our conference, we're a Power 4 lock. Now down the road, however they shake out, I don't know. But like as the current structure, if we win the conference, we have a bid. And realistically, we have a bye week. That's how it's going to shake out. So you're talking about what? You're talking about 8. So we'd have to win 2 games to get to national championship, 3 games to get to national championship. I don't think like with basketball, I think the road as far as we have the biggest avenue. I just think it's hard to beat Houston when they're putting so much money in their basketball. It's hard to beat Kansas when they're putting so much money, and we're not. That's why I don't see.
I think.
Imagine where did we fall this year as far as in the conference?
Oh, we fell. The bottom dropped out towards the end.
Yeah, and not saying that we had a good. I think we started off strong. I just think we fell out. But like best case scenario, what would be best case scenario in this conference realistically?
You mean the next few years?
Yeah, I give a 4-year window. Like, what would be the best case scenario in a 4-year window?
Well, I'll be honest with you. We don't care. And here's why. One, Johnny Dawkins, and I'm going to say this, love Johnny to death. I've said it over and over on here. He needs to go. We need a different coach that's going to fire these guys up and play basketball from a system that works. 2, you only need 2 really high profile, great players to make a difference on a basketball team of 5 and raise that level up, which I have confidence that we can spend that money. 3, to get into the NCAA tournament, you only need to be in the Big 12 top 7 or top 8 in the conference. So you don't need to win the conference.
Year, you don't even have to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess like how do we get like you're saying get 2 high profile guys? How do we get that with money? Because like these high profile guys go to the most money essentially, or they go to the schools that are going to churn me out one and done.
How did we get Mikey Williams? How did we get Jalen Sellers? How did we get all of these other guys? Like everybody knew who Mikey Williams was.
We need to not confuse high profile to like high performing guy. I mean, we can find the Keyshawn Halls that lead the conference in scoring, even though they weren't in a conference like this prior to that. Like we can find the right guys. I agree with you. It just needs to hit. It needs to hit. It needs to come together and at the same time. That's the thing. It's like I feel like we had some of the right talent, but didn't have the right mindset this year to get through some of those.
I don't think we had the right coach.
I don't think. Trust me, Roger. I understand that. I actually agree with you to a point because the roster construction wasn't great from a mindset standpoint. Like we didn't have anybody except for one guy new to the program that actually bought into the defensive concepts that I know Johnny Dawkins is coaching in every single practice. There was one player that was new to this roster that bought into those concepts, and that's it. Everyone else just wanted to play offense.
And I guess my point is the system didn't work. Defense does win championships in basketball too, but I think we need a different system. I think we need more fundamental basketball. A system that we can plug a high score into. But let me finish where I'm going with that, Ben.
I mean, this is the same conversation we had a million times. I'm agreeing with you that it wasn't right this year. I'm just saying that we don't need to beat a dead horse on whose fault it was.
No. But Trey's question is how do we get there with what we have? Let me throw some numbers at you.
A national championship, mind you. Like that.
Yeah,
like
I know that, but
let's get to the NCAA tournament.
My question is like, what guy realistically are we comparing to?
Hold on.
Could we have a team that could? What would we put together to beat
Trey? Let me answer your first question because this is what I was building towards. Right. So you said, how do we get to that national championship team? Right. $64 million was our budget when you were playing at UCF. That's what AD Danny White was working with. Right now, we're working with a $98 million budget. Okay. That budget is going to go up again. So we'll be at about $110, $115 million budget. So UCF will have gone from 64 to 110 to 115 million. In addition to that, a lot of that is going to go to pay the players, right? So the rev share concept, right? Which, by the way, has not been approved by anyone. So we're already gearing up for the rev share. We're going to do the rev share, but it hasn't been approved officially, just so everybody knows. We're going to have $20 million that we're going to split among the different sports. Basketball is going to get more money. It's a question of concentrating the money into certain players, and I feel like a coach. If we get a good enough coach that has a good enough system, we can get players like Jalen Sellers or Keyshawn Hall, and then a couple of maybe like a Mustafa Chiem or something like that that's difference makers. That will win at a level that can be competitive for a national championship. We've seen it with other teams. So that's, in my mind, if that's the plan, that's how I would get there. But we will have more money to play with. I know we keep talking about money, but we got to quit comparing the money that we have right now to what we're going to have.
I got a comment for that. I just want to hear what Trey has to say.
Because listen, I know I'm not the biggest basketball guy, but like I've watched our team, and I think Sellers and Keyshawn Hall are really good players. But Thiem, great player. That looks night and day when I watch Duke. It looks night and day when I've watched Florida, when I've watched Auburn. Like, I'm not even talking about like the middle. I'm talking about like the true national championship contenders. Those teams are going to churn these rosters every year because they have the money to do it. They have the funds to do it. They're going to keep doing it. So like, it's not going to be like, oh, Duke's going to slip off one year. Yeah, a Duke slip off might be they get eliminated in the Elite Eight, or the Sweet 16.
No, I mean, look at what's happened since you're bringing up Duke. What happened since Coach K left?
They're about to.
They aren't the same team,
but they might win a national championship. Right? Like that, but that's what I'm saying. Like you're talking about
with $5 million in flag, right?
Yeah, Coach K had them GOAT level all-time school ever. Now they're just still probably one of the top 2-3 schools in the country. Like that's like,
but even Coach K lost as a 3 seed to a 14 seed in the
NCAA. And I'm not saying a one. That's what I'm saying. Like I think a magical run.
What makes the tournament so great? I think the last thing I'm going to say about this, because I mean, people should know who know me. Like I've come around on the whole Dawkins thing. It is what it is. Like at this point, it is what it is. What you just described though, Roger, about the amount of money that we have coming in and the amount of money that we're supposedly going to spend on basketball as opposed to football. Here's the reality of that situation as well that you haven't mentioned. I'm not saying you haven't thought of it. I'm just saying you haven't mentioned in this conversation. If you've got $10 million to spend on your basketball roster this year, which I think we all know we probably don't have $10 million to spend on a basketball roster this year.
We had 8 million this year.
Okay, great. So say we have 10.
Yep.
Are you going to spend 10% of that to get rid of your coach and then spend another 20, 30% of that, 40% of that to buy another coach or entice another coach to come? Are you going to prioritize those dollars to fire your coach? And I think that's the reality of the situation that we're in. I'm not arguing as to why Dawkins is going to stay for another year. I'm actually saying that this is a bad idea. What I'm saying is this is the reality that nobody really wants to just like throw out there, is that like, yes, we're going to be frustrated at I should say the most vocal fans among us are going to be frustrated no matter what happens next season, and they're going to want Dawkins gone. But if he is here next season, it's mainly because gone are the days that you're overspending on coaches because you have to pay players. It's just, and so these coaches are locked in. Like, you're going to see more and more of these coaches taking less money, or the buyouts actually meaning something, or whatever, because the reality is you can't tie yourself to a coach.
So so you asked a would you rather, right? And so my opinion on that is you buy the coach first and then you build the team later.
Sure.
Because
it's just not going to happen at UCF this year. It's just not happening.
Well, it's not about this year. We're talking about how do you build it. And you asked what a general would you rather. And I think for me, if I have the opportunity to spend a little bit more, hold on, hear me out. Because you asked.
No, but I didn't ask that. I didn't ask would you rather in a long-term building. I was talking about this season. I was talking about this season.
Personally, I would burn the $1 million and go find a coach, but that's just me.
It's not gonna happen though. I understand that's what you would like to do. I'm just saying it's not gonna happen. It's not going to happen at UCF.
Well,
that's not the reality we live in.
Yeah, but you asked that question, and maybe you were asking rhetorically. But to me, if it were up to me, I believe in leaders. Whether it's in business or anything else, they make a huge difference. You can have the best players, but if you don't have the right guy leading those teams, the right guy could do more with less than the other way around. So personally, I think it's time to start with a clean slate, and the sooner that we get that started, the better. So I'd rather take it in the shorts now, get our next guy, because that would be if I were AD for a day, right? That would be my take on it.
I think that's the frustration that UCF fans on the whole, especially ones that want Dawkins to go, which again, I've come around on. I've accepted that reality that he's not going to be a long-term leader for us. I think that's the frustration that a lot of us are feeling is like, it feels like we're just keeping around for one more year. It's like a lame duck year. And it feels like we're like giving away next season if he stays. And it pains me to even think that way, because obviously we all love Dawkins, and I do as well. I mean, he's a great guy, and I think he's an incredible leader of men. It just, the system wise, it just hasn't quite worked out here.
No, and
the February slide is it's just too many years in a row of it.
It's been within Neal and outside of Neal, like outside of Taco Fall and some of the people from the previous regime. What are we seeing? We're going to TCU and seeing an NIT Final Four, which we can't see anymore, and lose to TCU, which I hated because I had to do that. Right? We started this conversation with the 5 people who are no longer on the team, and we assume they're no longer on the team. And to be frank, we all kind of get it. And at some point, if Mustafa Cham is not here, if an assistant coach goes away. So even the idea of continuing to have him on the team begets the assistant sticking around.
Yeah, I
whether or
think
not
that's what we all think, Josh, but we don't know like what his relationship is with Johnny Dawkins.
Fair. Cash rules everything around me at this point. So money will talk. But
No, I mean the reason why he's here. I'm saying.
that's fair.
We
That's fair.
assume it has to do with Mamadou Ndiaye. I'm just saying that I'm sure it does, but it's got to be a smaller percentage of why why you got to be for Johnny as well.
Fair. And so burn it down means we need to find we have to find the money and keep the other people who are supporting Neal around to provide the funding to bring someone in their team, kind of what Will Wade is doing over NC State, right? Like,
don't start with Will Wade. I was so mad about that.
But here's the thing: this is the reality right now, and the way he did this was really, really good, in my opinion. That team, like, I picked against Murray State, think of the mentality that this would cause, internal annoyance or whatever. Little did we know, he's been talking with his team about this the entire time and saying, look, if I'm going here and I'm getting this contract, you may or may not come with me, but it's a possibility. All these things, like the openness of how he talked about it, means also that the next coach of UCF, and within the next 2 or 3 years, there will be a next coach of UCF. We need to have the money in the bank, if you will, to bring them and the people they want to bring along as players too. So I tend to agree with where Roger's at. Rip off the Band-Aid. Let's just do it. But there has to be something else that is a hindrance that isn't Johnny, that's causing us to more than likely keep the one more year. I also note that at this point, having a 4-year contract or any of those things within specifically basketball, maybe even other sports, doesn't even matter anymore anyway. I don't know if anyone is ever getting a 5 or 7 year contract outside of big names like Patino or Pearl or Calipari and people like that, because you can just get rid of them in a year or two and buy another team if there's enough money in the market. So I feel like for UCF, what's going to happen is we're not going to rip the Band-Aid off. We're going to have another year. You'll hear us in 2026 frustrated in the same exact way. And then the Band-Aid will come off, and then maybe we have enough money and donors to do something.
The other thing too, from the money thing that we haven't talked about in a long time, is that the Big 12 and UCF is looking at a cash infusion from investors. So, and we're serious about that. Other conferences were looked at for that. They kind of declined, but the Big 12 is looking at that. And depending on what the situation looks like, come in the late, like mid 2030s, right, or even at 2030. I think we're gearing up for that now. So it'll be interesting. And some of that will go to basketball because it is the differentiator for the Big 12. I mean, look at the ACC. You got one team. And let's look at the results. The SEC all of a sudden got 14 teams in or whatever it was, right? They have 7 teams left. And that just goes to show how much of a fraud that was to bring in that many teams, right?
Well, we have 4 left. We're doing fine, right? I mean,
we had 7 teams in the tournament and 4
are still left. Yeah,
right. But
I think if the SEC still has the most teams, like I would rather have the most teams in. Yeah. And you lose half your team, but the SEC still has the most teams in the tournament left.
Well, now, you also started with 14 teams, so the law of averages. I mean, if we would have had West Virginia in, which should have gotten in over UNC, right? There would have been a 5th. I have no doubt in my mind that the way West Virginia was playing towards the end of the season and with the defense that they were playing, they would still be in this still be in the conversation. If you lose 2 of those 14 SEC teams,
well, UNC is the ACC. So it'd be 1.
I get that. My point is that because they had so many in, and in my opinion, not many deserving because they lost in the first weekend, right? Not in the round of 32, right? They didn't get to the round of 32.
I don't know. Like again,
Well,
Georgia
I
lost
think
to
my
a
thing
good
is Trey.
team.
What I'll say, Trey, is that like Texas getting in at 6-12, like 6-12 in your conference. Like you're 6-12 in your conference, and you got in. First off, the SEC plays 2 less conference games than the Big 12 does.
Yep.
And you win 6 of those 18 games, you win a third of your games in conference. And I don't care how much better the top of the SEC is marketed to be. But the middle to bottom of the SEC, not even like they're the Big 12 and Big 10 are right there with that conference. And the fact is, like, you're going to take a team like West Virginia, who has, many more. They had more quad 1 wins, had more quad 2 wins than UNC, than Texas. Like they had a better resume, and you put in Texas because they're Texas and because they're the SEC.
And you say with UNC, and I think because UNC, I guess who was the head of the selection committee, the UNCAD. You can tell me what you want. It's just like UF, we were talking about back in the day when Strickland was head of the playoff committee, right?
Yeah. I guess
tell me what you want, but that influence.
My ultimately, like, it's just like I don't see how we can rival these schools because again. Ultimately, this first conversation started. You think the basketball team can win a national championship before football? I just don't see how in basketball because basketball is so centered around star talent, whereas football it's a lot more team oriented, relatively speaking. And you still want to have elite players.
Football is the ultimate team sport, in my opinion.
And now you still have to have elite players in position, but it's a little bit easier to get them. Whereas again, to my point, how can we compete with Duke and Cooper Flag and all those guys? Not saying we can't beat them one time. I think anybody can lose once.
Yeah.
I'm just saying if we were to have to play them in the national championship, we'd have to rally off 4 games, then beat a Duke who has been essentially built. It's been paid for them to get to this point. How could we do that year in and year out? That's what I don't.
Well, I don't think Roger is saying. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Roger. I don't think
we're not going to become a blue blood overnight. No,
I'm just saying
the point
like
is
Houston.
And I don't know if I necessarily agree with it now that there's a 12, maybe 16 team playoff eventually and all that. Because you're right. I mean, we've got more chances to now get into the postseason that would lead to a national championship in football. So the thing about basketball, though, Trey, is that like in the conference that we're in, we win 10 games, we win half of our games in the conference, and then, a couple of good out of conference games, like we build enough resume to make the NCAA tournament. And what we have found in the NCAA tournament, we've seen it even like with teams like FAU a couple of years ago, like there are if you can get in, you have a chance. And that's where the two sports just kind of differ. You can have long runs in the NCAA tournament that may lead to the finishing it off. I mean, I'm not necessarily. I have a hard time saying which one of those sports would be the first of UCF. Golly, I hope we get to figure that out for real, at some point in the next decade. But
I'll take either one at this point.
Yeah, we would obviously take either one. The last thing I'll say is that we don't know what's going to happen after the Crown basketball tournament as far as UCF basketball goes. We don't know what's going to happen with our roster. And quite frankly, although we can try to project all we can, we actually don't know what's going to happen with Coach Dawkins either.
True.
And so I think that what we need to try our best not to do is every name that we heard of 2 weeks ago for the first time ever that gets hired at a bigger school because he coached a school to the NCAA tournament and that team's eliminated now. And now he's getting promoted to a big, SEC school or a Big 12 school or a Big 10 school. Like every name we freak out and we say, oh man, I wanted that guy. Like you heard about him a month ago, like chill out. Like, I think we all need to like chill out. There are a lot of good coaches out there, a lot of good young and up and coming coaches that can make an impact at UCF. And I hope we we turn the page and maybe go after them this offseason. If we don't, then I'll be honest, I'll be a little disappointed that we're not going for it, or at least perceived to not be going for it, as immediate as this offseason. But I also don't think it's the end of the world that if we actually do make that decision in 2 weeks after the Crown basketball tournament, that like we're not going to find our next head coach like in a great way, like, and it's going to make an impact as early as next season. Like, I don't think it's waiting that long. I don't think it's waiting too long, I should say. That's just my opinion.
All right. So let's leave it at that for now. And I want to get some positivity in the mix. So I'm going to shift gears. And
tennis? Tennis?
No. I'm going to shift gears and give out a little bit of listener love this week, and then we'll get into a little bit of baseball.
The comment from the live is great. I love that, Tim. Let's see if throws it.
Swivel. Yeah, there we go. Swivel.
Can we just bring back Pivot?
Do that. You know what?
9 people are like completely changing this show.
And Andrew Fagley says it's unprofessional. We're not allowed to do it anymore.
Oh my god! Bring it back.
All right, so
stumbling over our transitions.
Maybe we'll try out Swivel for a change. That being said, let me do a quick shout out at Link Zulu or Jerry, Nick Hamill at Nick Hamill, Gianna April. G has been, I've known G for a really long time. She's jumped on board. And several others that are on here that have joined us on YouTube, but I can't see what your names are because you don't have it set for me to, or anybody to be able to see what your names are. So welcome to our new followers on YouTube and X and all of the other platforms that we have. We appreciate you. And as Tim so greatly demonstrated, you have the opportunity to change the show or what we're talking about and participate. And we want you to be a part of it. So make sure you like, subscribe, share with your friends, and jump in the chat. So thank you, by the way, Tim, for coining our new transition. So I'll try it out here. And swivel.
I don't know if we need to all say swivel. So you can say we're going to swivel and do blah, 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 blah.
Just swivel. Just swivel. I don't want to hear it. Swivel. Wow. Oh, you guys are terrible. All right. I think I'm going to fire Josh after the show. Let's go ahead and
What's your buyout, Josh?
My no buyout. I'm not going to say that. We're liable. I have a good joke, but Roger will kill me.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about UCF baseball, who's now 17-6. As we mentioned, Ben and I did have a chance to watch the guys live and play Houston. But first, we did play Stetson, or as many like to call them, Stepson. They used to be one of our arch rivals, but UCF has kind of moved on and moved up. Stetson still fields a pretty good team. They were doing well early, but then kind of fell off. We did beat them 3-0. But what's interesting is, Stetson showed this, and so did Houston, as did BYU. Our bats have kind of quieted, right? So we were putting double-digit numbers up in the series against Houston. We ended up losing the first game, won the second game, and lost the last game, and it was largely because of the bats. So Ben, what do you think is going on with the bats? And Trey, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. Josh, maybe. He's on my list right now.
I know, that's why I did it in the chat.
So yeah, I think we have to be a little careful because baseball season is a lot of games, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we have to be a little careful on. Like, we're going to go through a lot of this, like little slumps or whatever they may be. And I can't even really call it a slump. It's just, it was 2 games where, in particular, like the game on Friday night, Houston got hot. Like we started out 5-0, and I can't remember what inning, but I think it was the 5th inning. Like Houston just broke it open. Like they put 6 runs on us. And then at that immediate time, like, so they put 6 runs on us in the top of the 5th. They take the lead. And then Houston puts in a pitcher that was just pitching lights out. I mean, the pitcher that Houston put in, his name escapes me, but it doesn't matter. I mean, he just shut our team down in that moment. Like, it was a relief pitcher that was just hot, and everything was working for him. And it was just, that type of stuff happens in baseball games, let alone a baseball series. It was the opposite on Saturday night when Roger and I were in attendance, in the sense that, we were ahead most of the game, but it was a very low scoring kind of pitcher's battle type game. We certainly had some hard hits in the first 7 innings of that game. They were just going to a lot of Houston defenders. And then all of a sudden we finally get that starting pitcher out in the 8th inning. And we kind of move some players around the bases with our first 2 outs that we could spare. We scored a run on a ground ball by Richard, by Cruzen's ground ball was the first run that was scored. It was by Roger's boy there, Cruzen. He had a ground ball like to shortstop that was like a chopper, and the bases were. I think there was a runner on third. No matter what, it was 1 out, and he used that 1 out to drive in the first run, and then all of a sudden we got to our top of our lineup, which is the whole goal, right? And Ross goes up there, he loads the bases with a walk, and then all of a sudden the bats started coming alive, and we were able to break that game wide open in the 8th inning. Sunday was just a different story. It was I don't necessarily think our bats like quieted to a point where this is a concern, because I mean, we can't say that because we're still number 3 in the country in batting average as a team. We're still number 3 in the country at batting average as a team. So, like, I mean, this is a long baseball season. I mean, earned run average as pitching staff, we're number 7 in the country. So we're still well over. We're batting .338 as a team. That is stellar. That is elite. Now, we obviously have the meat of our schedule coming up. We've got some tough opponents. We need to get it together, and we can all trust, Coach Rich Wallace to get his team together and in the right mindset moving forward. But I don't want to read too much into our first series loss of the season. It's a long season. It's 55 games, and we were able to take one of them, but unfortunately we lost the 2.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me, from the hitting perspective, especially on Sunday's game, is we left a lot of guys on base, right? Mm-hmm. And so,
gotta have time.
Part of that is we're playing better teams that are better prepared. We saw it with BYU; they had their shifts down pat, and that's what made BYU a tough series win. There was obviously, I think the cold affected everybody, but But I think that they just played really, really good defense. Houston, even in Saturday's game, had some really outstanding defensive plays. But I think Sunday's series, the rubber match, I think the big thing there was we just left too many on. So earlier on in the season, we were doing well at moving people into scoring position, playing small ball. We just haven't been doing as well as at getting them across the plate at home as what we had been doing earlier in the season. Because, yes, we scored a lot of runs with big hits and home runs and all of that other stuff. But we also scored a lot of runs with small ball, and the small ball just has been playing tougher defenses that have been – and Houston made some plays that was just like, wow, right? So did we, for that matter. I mean, that the game that we were at, Ben, where we held it to 1 score, and then we've had a few throws from the outfield that have got guys trying to score. And then, we've also are catching with King behind the plate. and picking off runners that are trying to steal has been outstanding as well. His arm is outstanding defensively. But I think the biggest part with us is our small ball hasn't been as good, and part of that is better coaching that we're playing against and who are playing better defense. But I think long term it'll shake itself out as we kind of learn and adjust our hitting over the long term. So
to your point, we left 10 on base on Sunday. They they stranded 7, so. It was kind of back and forth from that perspective, but that's what happens in baseball games. It's just time. You got to have timely hitting. Yeah, it's the way it goes, and you got to make plays when it counts. And they just made a few more plays than we did.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Well, we've got a midweek game this week. Who are we playing midweek again?
We are playing Jacksonville tomorrow night. 7:00.
Yeah, and Jacksonville.
We're going up to their place, and then we have Cincinnati at home.
Yeah, and in the past, Jacksonville has had a fairly consistently good baseball team.
Cincinnati on the road. I just said Cincinnati at home. I wanted to correct myself.
Yeah, at Cincinnati, at their baseball stadium, which it still kind of trips me out that they're doing halfway decent in baseball the last few years, but they have been. But we get a chance to shake off the cobwebs and get go into Cincinnati with a win. If we once we play at JU, it's a short trip, should be a dub, and then we'll get back into the groove with Cincinnati. The other thing people have been talking about is Castellanos. He's been really good for us all year long. He didn't have his best outings this weekend. He got batted around a little bit, but he's still a good pitcher. He hasn't lost it. He'll be fine. It's just they were seeing the ball really well, and you hear this euphemism all the time. Sometimes they, baseballs look like golf balls, and sometimes they look like beach balls when you're on it, when you're hitting. And for Houston, unfortunately, they were looking like beach balls more than they were.
And we even saw it we were talking on our text talk. We've been talking all season about how when Sandifer comes in the game, just how he's got some nasty stuff. And just on Saturday night, even he just didn't have it. He got pulled quickly, and then Galvan comes in and he did his thing. So, we got a deep bullpen on this team. I think we're a really well-rounded team. And I just looked up too. I was talking about the pitching and hitting stats, as far as their rank in the country. But I just looked up as well. We're number 12 in the country in fielding percentage as well. So we've got,
some great defensive plays.
Yeah, I think that highlights just the well-rounded team that Rich has put together, and it's exciting to see it. And I've said it a few times before. I've certainly said it a lot in our text talk, but UCF fans just really need to enjoy their time with Jimenez at shortstop for UCF. And we're going to enjoy watching him play baseball for many years to come. In my opinion, I'm not an MLB scout. I don't pretend to be, but he's one of the best defensive shortstops I've seen in live and just in general. I just think he's incredible defensively, and he's not a bad bat either. So that guy's a stud.
Yeah, we've got a lot of those type of players. And by the way, Galvan is tall. Not compared to you, but someone like me who's just shy of 6 feet tall, right? Seeing him walk around, you just realize how massive of a human being that guy actually is.
That's most baseball players, right? When you expect basketball players to be tall, and you walk around them, you're like, oh yeah, like Ben, right? Baseball players are a different breed. They seem like, you think sometimes there's 5'9", 5'10" shortstop, and they're still
not anymore.
Players.
Yeah.
Like Aaron Judge level at this point.
They're all most of them are 6'1". 6'2" at least, right? So Eden Espinal is an exception to that rule because he is shorter than I am, but man, does he have an eye the ball. But yeah, you're right. And part of that too, if you watch our progression as a program, right, as we moved up from the AAC to the Big 12, the caliber and it's the same way with football, right? When you're in the AAC, you guys have some guys that are really, really talented, but they don't have the physique that you would. Look at the middle linebacker position in the Big 12, where we've got guys that are coming in that are 6'3", 6'4", 245 pounds. We didn't have that before. Our Mike linebackers were 6'1", 220, 215, something like that, right? So the caliber of athlete that we have access to now in the Big 12 in baseball is different. And a lot of that is they may be just as talented, but they are not as physically gifted. And our baseball team, all of them are 6'1" plus, mostly, right? Most of them are 6'1" plus and strong dudes. So that was all what always struck me when we were playing like UF every year, right? Like how the physical difference between their players and ours, right? And I think now you're starting to see that we've upgraded from that perspective. All right, that's all we've got for baseball for this week. Let's go ahead and swivel to Josh's sometimes funny fact of the week. All right, Josh, what have you got for us this week?
So, I was just thinking about what I do in our show notes, which is usually go into the sports that Alan does not watch. And softball didn't have so great of a week this week. And I looked ahead and went, oh, we're playing that team. In 2 weeks, we're playing Oklahoma twice. So I did some research on Oklahoma. You should probably know they're
we're playing UF too, aren't we?
Playing UF midweek this week, yes.
Yeah,
which is exactly. That's what we get for losing to Iowa State 3 times. So I was curious. Since Oklahoma is a phenomenal program, I have 2 questions for you.
They were on a 36-game winning streak and lost against Missouri this past weekend for the first time.
Correct. And this is part of my question. Since COVID, how many losses does Oklahoma softball have as of today? You got 1 because they lost this weekend to Mizzou. Only once. Since 2020, after the 2020 season.
Man, I know they're good, but I don't want to go too low here.
I want to say
it's
7
digits.
7? Okay. Trey, you're saying double digits?
I said it's single digits.
Single digits? Okay.
I'll say 8.
7.
Because they didn't win the World Series. They didn't win the championship every year.
Yes, they have. They won 4 in a row.
Have they won 4 in a row now?
Yes.
3. COVID, I don't think really counted.
I'll price is right here, and I'll say
the girls that graduated last year won the national championship every year they were in college.
So I know that they've won the national championship for the last 3 years. COVID's weird, so they've won at least 5 of the last 7-ish. They have, including this year, they have 9 losses total. Since 2020. They're 205 in 9 since COVID.
That's crazy.
Can you imagine being a freshman on that team? So
follow-up question. We were talking about Neal. And anyone in the comments, I'd love for you to try to guess this too. Patty Gasso's salary, and she's been there since I think 95. How much money is the head coach of Oklahoma's softball team making a year? Rogers, get the coach first. We got $3 million on Trey.
I was going to say 2.5.
Okay.
2.5.
A year, or is it
a year?
Oh, yeah. Jeez, I don't even know. I'm not good with coaches' salaries. I'll just say $3 million. I have no idea.
All right. Amazingly enough, it should be. She got bumped to $1.775 million in like 2023, which is an insane amount of money. Tim's in the comments more than me. Well, that's the thing.
More than all of us right now. I'm looking to change that.
Do do we spend $2 million a year to try to get the best coach in the NCAA?
Softball? No.
No,
Okay.
It's
we're not
not
having this
ready.
conversation again. We're not spending the money on softball.
I know we don't even have shade.
We're happy with there.
So, but and truth be told, that's probably underpaid. But this Oklahoma's been good, but they've been this good for the past like 10-ish years. Like I had to look back. I think 2014 is the last time they lost more than 10 games in the season, something like that. But that just to me is phenomenal. Like that's just that level of domination is hopefully we can score a run when we see them.
Well,
anyway.
since we're talking softball, let's talk
Sure.
a little bit about softball. Softball's talent in the circle is phenomenal.
Mhm.
We've got three
Yes.
really good pitchers, good pitchers, like elite pitchers, right?
Yes.
One
One's a
of
freshman.
them,
At least one's a freshman, I think.
yeah,
Yeah,
one of
she's
them's a
a freshman.
freshman. And we also, and this is a point I made this past week, we also have a very young team as far as the hitting is concerned, right? So it's been kind of spotty, and it wasn't good against Iowa State. They will get better. This is we've had a lot of good success with Coach Bear, but we lost a lot of key pieces as far as hitting is concerned. And a lot of those key pieces we brought in via the transfer portal as well. So, some folks are questioning, okay, let's talk about who we brought in for the hitting coach, because our hitting coach changed this year too, a former baseball coach. A lot of softball teams are doing that, including the premier brands that are bringing in baseball coaches to teach or to coach hitting on softball teams. So I don't necessarily think it's that. I think it's more when it comes to freshman softball players, they're going to take longer to be able to hit at that high level, especially given the conference and the teams that we're playing. Even out of conference, we played a lot of high-level teams as well. Coach Bear likes to do that. So they will get better throughout the season. It just, they've just not been doing well. And it's a very young team. So expect that to get better.
Like the other weekend, they beat number 7 Arizona in the conference.
Exactly.
So, like, it's just freshman growing pains. Like, they can be really good one week and, again, get swept by Iowa State the next week. Like, that's the difference where you have a team like Oklahoma. Like, they're consistently good all the time. So,
but we do have really, really good talent in the circle,
a lot of potential
staff, and they're young as well. And so that means they're going to be good for us for a while, because unlike a lot of the other sports, you are seeing more transfers in softball, but it's not as prevalent.
No. Yeah.
So, all right, let's go ahead and swivel.
Swivel
again. And it looks like Ben swiveled to the bathroom. Let's go ahead and do a quick update. Oh, there he is. He swiveled in his chair. Let's go ahead and do a quick update on other UCF sports that Alan does not watch. Josh Lazar, take it away.
All right. Well, we already talked about baseball, and Alan may or may not watch that at times, so probably not. Let's talk about the two best teams on this campus. The two best teams on this campus are women's and men's tennis. So women's tennis is 15-2 in the season. Number 17, maybe that's going to go up soon. I didn't see the latest rankings yet, but they lost their first match in Big 12 play this past week. They did blank Colorado 4-0, but they did lose to number 12 Texas Tech in Lubbock. So, at least it's not in USTA 4-1. So we have 2 weekend games coming up. We actually have a third home game coming up soon too. But coming up this week is Cincinnati on Friday on March 28th and West Virginia on March 30th, both at 12 p.m. at the USTA National Campus in Lake Nona, Florida. Now, men's tennis is number 11, and they're 16-6 in the year. They had a Utah road trip, which I'm sure someone talked to you, all of you, dear gentle readers, in last week's podcast. They were in Utah and lost 2-4 to BYU, probably because it was 2 degrees outside. And then because there was a big snowstorm that went through Tahoe and where I was in California. So I'm sure that blanketed Utah too once it got across Nevada.
We feel so bad for you to being in Lake Tahoe, Josh. So
I wasn't in
bad.
Lake Tahoe. I was in Yosemite. I was a little further south. Although a friend of mine was in Tahoe and they got like 4 feet of snow. So there's a lot of snow out there if you were there for spring break over here in Orange County. Back to the beat. We did beat number 53 Utah 4-1 on this Utah road trip. They get a week off. The men's team is not playing until April 6th. Actually April 3rd. They're playing number 17 Baylor at USTA, and then number 32 Arizona State at April 6th at Lake Nona. After that, we have a couple more road games, 2 more, and the Big 12 Championship in Waco in mid-April, 18th to 20th. Also, the NCAA tournaments in early May. Hopefully, we get there. UCF softballs we talked about is 20 and 14. I think that might be 20-14-1 after losing the series to Iowa State at home 0-3. We all were poo-pooing that and very sad. What do we get for 3 L's in a row? We get to play number 3 UF at the Plex on the 26th at 6 p.m. and get on a flight to Waco to see the Fighting Joanna Gaines's Baylor this weekend. That's going to be. I hope we get 2 wins out of the 4. I'm hoping. So, and next weekend we see number 1 Oklahoma twice, as I wrote down there. Women's track and field, not too much going on there. The indoor championships happened. I don't even know if anyone talked about in the podcast. I was out of the office and on vacation, so I'm guessing not because I didn't see anything in the show notes. We had a couple of All-Americans from the indoor championships, so that was good, but not too much else going on there right now. If anything happens really big in golf and track and field, we'll try to let you know.
Well, I will say this, campus was popping with track teams this past week. I was on campus on Thursday and Friday getting passports done for my kids for an upcoming trip to Costa Rica. And I managed to get all 3 Canaveral blue hats, New Era hats, while I was on campus. Nice. So finally I can tell Rich he doesn't have to get me that baseball hat anymore. I've got them. Yes. They were featured on some of the shorts this past week. So, that being said, there was a whole lot of track and field going on this week. I know softball, we just talked about their hitting. Please make sure that you're going out and supporting them. I started the show talking about why we watch sports and not forgetting, in spite of all the big issues that we talk about on this show, there are some good players out there that want to be here and are sporting the black and gold. So make sure you're supporting those teams. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the Crown. We appreciate all of y'all, and thank you guys for being on the show. It was great to have an almost full house. Alan, we hope you feel better. Remember to like, subscribe, follow, tell your friends. Go Knights, and
Charge
on.
Charge on, baby.
That was in sync. That's what happens when I come back